Somebody asked me a question the other day. It's a pretty good one, too, something that many people struggle with. Here's the question. Well, if you wait upon the Lord, and if you're waiting for his resolve, do you just sit back and watch, things happen? Do you sit back and what are you supposed to do if somebody comes at your family or this, that, and the other? What do you do? Do you not get engaged? Or you're just supposed to sit back and watch things happen before you? This is a two-part answer. Actually, it's going to be a multi-part answer, but a very simple answer. But first, I need to tell you something. A caution, some advice. Never live your life in what-if scenario. The Lord didn't work with me, guys. I wouldn't know a thing. I'm telling you that right now. Fear is an entity. In the Bible, it says God did not give us a spirit of fear. He speaks on, and it demonstrates in the Bible how that a sober mind is the opposite of fear. So fear is a state, is a spirit that amplifies the way you see, but in a very weird way. Fear is normally caused by somebody living in their imagination of things that have not happened yet. Have you noticed in your life, you have had moments in your life where you were very fearful. You didn't tell anybody, but you were very fearful of what was coming in the next day, or very fearful about a situation and what would happen. And all you did the entire time was think of what-if scenarios until you hit a point of desperation and you scared yourself to pieces. But to make it short, the end result was nothing like anything you imagined. Somebody know what I'm talking about? In fact, when you got through the situation, you were so jumbled up in the mind, you scarcely know how you got through. And as soon as it's over, listen, here's the big one. As soon as it's over, it's almost like you instantly forget you ever had fear in the first place. And it's because you stopped utilizing your imagination, and the entity fled. Because you became thankful it was over, love entered back into your heart, a type of thanks, and the entity fled. When you think of what-if scenarios, you will imagine a future or time in your imagination, and that spirit begins to feed that picture that you imagined. It feeds it. It puts elements in it. These are lies. The plausible things that you know about it will place those in your imagination, and then you become fearful of something that does not exist. Something that hasn't happened yet. And then you begin to live by what-if scenarios. Well, what if this and what if that? Well, that's not living by truth. Can you all see that? Never live your life by imagination and what-if scenarios. There's so many people in America that are armed with weapons. And I remember in 2011, people would say, well, what if DHS comes to my house? Or what if somebody comes and tries to take my supplies? Remember, guys, that's when they were buying supplies. And I had an answer. I asked the people, I said, of all of you who have weapons, has anybody come to your home yet to rob you of your food? They said no. Have you had to use those weapons against somebody? They said no. I said, but you're thinking up scenarios in a condition that the Lord has already spoken about. What do you mean? Well, the Lord said he'd never place upon you that beyond which you can bear. You know what it means? He's not going to put you in a position of compromise. Your trials and tribulations, they exact a choice. You have to make a choice in those. It's never a position of compromise. He doesn't do that. That would be iniquity, wouldn't it? To put you in a situation where you would lose your salvation, you would be forced to murder or something like that. No, he's not going to do that. Not when you belong to him. He's never done that. There are people who have dusty weapons in their homes that they had started, because they thought something was getting them. This is what your imagination will do. And people will say, well, what if it's real? What if it comes true? What if this? No. Don't live your life by imagination. You need not do that. The Lord has already given us what he will do. We just need to do well to believe his word. Are you to sit and do nothing, though, when you see something? Oh, no. There's never a time in my life when I sat idle. Never. Though I have great patience, a very super high tolerance, and only because I care for people, and I care for people only because the Lord opened my eyes to people to see them in a different way. But are you to sit there and do nothing? No. You have a task before you that the average person cannot do. See, to engage physically in a combative way is easy. It's easy to react. That's natural to the flesh. That makes you feel like you're doing something. Anybody ever sit around, somebody's working to your left? You start feeling guilty because you feel you should be doing something to help them. Anybody have that? I know that everybody has that. Everybody can see somebody else working. They'll start feeling guilty because the other person's working. They'll say, well, I've got to do something. I just can't sit here. I feel out of place. That person's sweating over there and I'm doing nothing. All of a sudden you get anxious. You start feeling anxiety. Why? Because you're entertaining your imagination outside of the realm of sobriety. Anybody ever have a situation or a problem and you have to do something so you feel like you're doing something? All you're doing is fooling yourselves. You're trying to ease the agitation of your flesh and mind. That's all you're doing. It's not like you're solving the problem. You're just doing something to satisfy the situation at the moment, but you're not changing the situation. Once you begin to see that, you stop operating by the imagination. You don't operate like that. You operate differently. You operate by instruction. See, the Lord gave us standing instructions, and believe me, those are rough enough. For example, if we are to take the gospel everywhere we go, right, to be ambassadors to Christ, then you have to be an example of Christ, not of yourself, of Christ, not of what you think, but of Christ. And if you're an example of Christ, because you represent the kingdom of God, that means you're walking around with the standards of Christ. That means you're standing in the enemy's camp, in the place where you don't want to go, because that will cause you real fear. You're standing in the enemy's camp, delivering whatever the Lord gives you to deliver under penalty of death, threat, and other things. That is so much harder than to involve yourself in somebody's argument. It is harder to stand in the face of someone who wants to kill you, but love them past their own flesh to the point where the power of love, because it says God is love, where God begins to use you to change that individual. It's harder to do that, to stand there by faith, not knowing what the end result will be. It's harder to do that than to stand far off and holler threats at somebody. Anybody can lash out at anybody. That's easy. Anybody can talk until their oxygen is gone. That's easy. It's very difficult to stand in full trust on the Lord in a very threatening situation, in a very unfair situation, in a wrong situation, trusting all words of the Lord, refusing to move from the truth of the Lord's word, and love someone past their own flesh, and speak to them for their own benefit, not for yours. See, that's unfamiliar to people. Anybody ever do something when you were young and you know you needed to tell your parents, but it was like the hardest thing to do? It was easier to go hide. It was easier to put it off. But it was almost impossible to even tell. Anybody ever do that? Anybody ever get themselves in a situation that was almost impossible to face? You didn't want to open up that envelope. You wanted the envelope to vanish, to disappear. You didn't want to see what the outcome of this, that, and the other was. Got pretty tough to face the unknown, didn't it? It's easy to face something familiar, no matter what it is. Very difficult to face the unknown. isn't it? Well, see, your Father called you into the unknown. When he sent his disciples 2 by 2, he didn't send them to, places that they were going to be comfortable in. They had no idea what the outcome would be. That's pretty difficult. Just like that envelope. So is your walk as a Christian. Because you don't jump in with the crowd and do what they do. No, you're held by a different standard. That means you have to be willing to be spit on by everybody, yet still operate in truth with the greatest of integrity for the benefit of those you go to, even the ones that spit on you. That's pretty tough. It's harder to stop your flesh from reacting and still operate in faith and with love and with high integrity and with all hope for the other person. That's very tough to do. It's easier to lash back out and point out and criticize every fault a person has. That's common. That's easy. The Lord didn't call you to do that. He didn't call you to go to everybody and name their faults. No. He called you to carry his gospel. Gospel, that word means good news. He called you to carry the good news into very dark places. Jesus was found in a place where whoremongers were. People were drunkards, gluttonous. People were there, and they started the reputation thing. He had to suffer being called everything in the book. But he did so by direction of the Father, and I thank God he did. Because if he didn't walk into those dark places, how then could we ever be saved? Were you not in a dark place when he came to save you? I think that all of us were. And if he called us to do what he does, that means you walk in the impossible places. That's very tough to do. It's easy to take a trip to a familiar place. Not so easy to pack for a place you've never been to in your life because you don't know what to bring. Therefore, you have to operate by faith. You have no proof. You have no intelligence. You have no anything. You have to operate by faith. That's very tough, isn't it? It's very tough to operate by faith, to go into the unknown. The Lord made us as lights in this world. He said he was a light in this world when he was in the world, but that when he left, we would become lights in the world. And he made the lights to sit in the darkness. He didn't make the lights to sit in the light. See, a lot of people right now, they want to sit among believers. That's where they're comfortable. Oh, let's get together, believers. Let's get together and let's talk and have a good old time. But who's going out to the dark places? Easy to sit amongst each other, right? And discuss the Lord and have no interruptions, no this and yes. Very easy. Not so easy to go among the secular places, to stand in representation of the Lord and do something. I did that for about 3 or 4 years. Being in places that were terrible. And then when somebody would turn and ask me a question, it would be a sincere one, and I would give them a sincere answer. To suffer everything to be there out of instruction. And the Lord never failed to bring him right over to the table. He never failed. But it's very difficult to be willing to go there because your mind will tell you you've got no business there. They're going to talk about you. That's not where you belong. You can't be seen like that. You don't want that reputation. Correct? So what I'm telling you is very difficult for the flesh to fulfill any works of the Lord. But by the Spirit, you're called to certain places. You know that in your life, you were directed to go to certain places, but because of your flesh and because it was so unfamiliar and because you were so indifferent to it, because it was not a place you would normally go, you said, no, I can't do that. You debated with yourself. Even after clear instruction from the Lord. Maybe you walked past somebody and the Lord said, give. And you said, well, I can't do that. I don't even know that person. I don't know what happened with that. And you could so easily ignore it. It's not so easy to pay attention to it and follow through with it, is it? Because everybody would scoff it. You don't know what the reaction would be to an individual, would you? Of course not. The Lord didn't call us to walk like everybody else. He called us to walk like he did. And I believe that during his walk, they wanted to kill him every step of the way. He went to places, they said, don't come back here. And he went right back. He sent his apostles back and everything else. He did so by command of the Father. And the Father knew what he was doing. So Jesus gave it a good example of walking by faith, which is not to trust your own intelligence, but to walk by way of the Spirit, not by sight. If you walk by sight, you'll never get too far because everything looks too dangerous. Because nothing ever looks right. Nothing ever looks timely. You operate by the Spirit and you walk by faith. You'll see how the Lord begins to work. And it's a beautiful word, but it's always challenging. You know what? It never gets easy. Never. Never, 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 never. Never gets easy. It's very tough. Listen, it's very easy to react when you see something. It is not so easy to hold your peace and sincerely begin to fast and pray for the very ones that want to kill you. Not sit there and do nothing like you're dead in your recliner, but to set it in your heart to fast and pray for the ones the world calls helpless, for the ones your friends say they're condemned. But did the Lord tell you they were condemned? See, flesh often will say that. Jesus called the Pharisees a brood of vipers, but he did not tell them they were condemned. Oh, I love that one. He told them what they were because they were listening to Satan. He never once said they had to stay that way. He never once said they were going to die that way because he sent his apostles back to the very ones who killed him, so their souls could be saved. Thank you, Lord Jesus, for your faithfulness. Now, that's an example. He loved his enemies enough to send his beloved right back to his enemies to face the same harm and danger he faced for the salvation of their souls. That's what he did. And what do? We think of another mission. Well, I'm glad I'm out of that place. I'm never going back. The Lord already knew this, though, so I'm going to tell you something. He already knew we would shy away from going into the darkness. He already knew it. So guess what he did? In your life, you have been set right down in the middle of your assignment. That's the funny part. How so, you may ask? Well, that's why you have family complaints. That's why many of you have family complaints. Well, my family, they just won't listen to anything. Well, that's why the Lord put you there. Well, my family doesn't want to hear a word I have to say. Well, that's why he put you there. Well, I can't talk to, so-and-so, because every time I do, that's why the Lord put you there. And you don't want that. You want to go out in the street where somebody can easily hear. Nope, he stuck you somewhere else. There are other people. Oh, I'm sick. When am I ever going to be healed? I'm always going to the hospital. Yeah, among others who are sick. But you're the Christian, they're not. You're the one that brings your Bible with you. They don't. Have you opened that Bible? Have they seen you trusting your Lord? No matter how the depth of your sickness, do you still speak hope? You know what's so encouraging? When you see a sick person, who is really sick, yet they speak hope, even when they're sick. That always touches my heart. It does. It makes me want to stop every complaint I would ever have. When I saw, I'm going to give you this story in a church. It happened in church one time. I saw this old lady. My goodness, I can barely talk about it too. All right, it breaks me down. But I saw this old lady, and she was so frail, so frail. And, we were in a church and having church, and she said she wanted to sing. She did. She wanted to sing. So she got up there, and first I couldn't believe it. I was like, man, she's so frail. Because she had breathing problems. She couldn't walk right. She was real close to death. She was on dialysis, a whole bunch of other things. But I'm telling you, she grabbed the microphone. She even had it upside down first. Pastor came and turned it right side up, and she started singing, and it was the most terrible singing you ever heard in your life. But she kept singing. And at first, It was like, my goodness, that's awful singing. What in the world? But then she kept singing. And as she kept singing, you focused on the words. You saw her frail. She couldn't sing. She was not attractive by any means. But she sang. She sang unto the Lord, right? And as she sang in her sick state, and she was messing up the words, but she sang it with all of her heart. When she got finished, I think it messed everybody. A spiritual move took place in that church I've never seen since. She could not sing. She really looked like death warmed over. She became the most precious human being on the face of the earth because she sang it to the Lord. And it began to break down everybody. In hindsight, when you see something like that, and you're going through things, and you remember that, because everybody could perceive that sincerity. Folks, it was awful singing. It was all messed up, but she sang it unto the Lord. And because of her health, it made it too real. Because she did it with all of what she had. When you see things like that, and you see a person in distress, but they're trusting the Lord and giving him thanks with all of what they are, it will eject demons. It will force Satan out of every nook and cranny. Wherever he is, he cannot stay. Where things like that are demonstrated. There is no miracle on earth I could ever see that could ever match what I saw that day. Some of you, your health is not too good, but you love the Lord. So love him. Love him. Be thankful to him. And you, and through you, chains from other folks will most certainly be broken. If you could be authentic to what's really in your heart, you could change so much in other people. You're not where you are because of misfortune. You are positioned there for a work. I tell you, a person can preach their entire life, and they cannot achieve